Prague off the beaten track. Vít Pohanka takes you away from the crowds to the city's hidden gems.
Hello and welcome to Prague off the beaten track. Today I got off the tram at Přístaviště, which literally means the river harbour, and followed a path leading up from the busy Modřanská street along the Vltava River. Then I took a right turn, and after quite a steep climb on a staircase among the trees, the traffic noise kind of faded away, and I suddenly found myself surrounded by quiet woodland and weathered limestone cliffs. They are not exactly white, like you might expect from limestone, like the cliffs of Dover, but they still stand out very clearly above the neighborhood. This is Branícké skály, or the Braník Rocks, one of the most remarkable geological formations in Prague. These rocks, once quarried for the famous Old Town lime that helped build Prague's embankments and bridges, are now a protected natural monument. Its area is several hectares, I think about 8, and beneath the quiet sun-baked slopes are layers of limestone, as I read, dating back some 420 million years to the border between Silurian and Devonian periods. I learned all this by reading the materials here on some information tables. Fossils of ancient sea creatures, traces of wartime tunnels, and even stories of hidden treasure. That is Branícké skály, and that is what they have all. Because I think this is quite interesting. During the Second World War, the cliffs gained a kind of darker chapter in their story, because the German army built several tunnels, or dug several tunnels, 7 in total, as I read, and it was a part of a planned underground factory that would be safely hidden from air raids. Today, the entrances are sealed, but you can still see the outlines of the wartime works among the trees and rocks. There are some local enthusiasts from the Nautilus Society, as I found out, who have been trying to make these tunnels accessible to the public, but they haven't succeeded as yet. They would like to have a small exhibition about the history of the tunnels, but as I mentioned, they haven't succeeded as yet. There was a quarry, or there still is a quarry, but it's not used anymore, and above it rises the so-called Dobeška Hill. It's one of the rocks, basically, and it's the one that I just climbed. And I am at a kind of podium that actor and architect David Vávra, probably not very well known to international audiences, but very well known in Czechia, designed this wooden kind of lookout platform. It's not very tall, it's a modest 2-meter high structure, but it offers surprisingly wide views over the Vltava Valley. On sunny days, or partially sunny days like today, it's a perfect spot to rest and watch the light shifting across the limestone cliffs and the river below. A little further south lies Školní vrch, a smaller, slightly, I think, quieter and scientifically, however, even more important hill, as I can read here, because geologists can literally touch the boundary between two ancient earths of Earth's history. The exposed layers of limestone and shale mark the transition between, as I mentioned, Silurian and Devonian periods, and this site is even recognized internationally as a stratotype, a kind of global reference point for studying that time in geological history. So if you are lucky, you might still find tiny fossils, but unfortunately I wasn't so lucky. They are, I think, kind of reminders that this whole area once lay beneath a prehistoric sea. But it's definitely not just geologists and hikers who are drawn to Branícké skály, because they are also a favorite spot for Prague's rock climbing community. Because the rock dries quickly after rain, climbers can head here almost any time of year, and it's one of the few natural crags within easy reach of the city center. On weekends especially, you'll often see students, couples and local enthusiasts hauling their ropes and gear up from the tram stop at Přístaviště, where I got off, testing their strength on the sun-warmed limestone, especially if the weather is nice, of course. The old quarry walls offer actually dozens of routes of varying difficulty. The gentle slabs on the left side are perfect, as I read, for beginners, while the central overhangs challenge even experienced climbers. So many of these routes were first secured and documented by some local climbers. Some sections near the small church, which is actually under the rock, remain off limits due to the risk of rockfall. I think a reminder that nature here is still very much alive and unpredictable. It's definitely true that today Branické Skály is one of the most accessible outdoor climbing areas in Prague, framed by history and open all year round, even though when I'm here today on an October, slightly cold day, I don't see anyone. But back to the small wooden platform, the Vávrová vyhlídka that I described earlier. The panorama which I have in front of me is nothing short of spectacular, really. Below the Vltava curves kind of gently through the southern part of Prague, with Modranská Street on this side of the river and the occasional tram passing along the riverside. And on clear days like this, your eyes can follow the river's path towards the center, across the bridges, past the spires of Vyšehrad that I can see from here, that I described in one of the previous episodes. And if you look carefully, all the way to the Prague Castle, and even from here I can quite clearly see the Petřín Hill with its tower and the St. Vitus Cathedral on a slightly more distant horizon. And if I look directly opposite the river, on the other bank, there rise the Dívčí hrady, or the girls' castles, those mysterious other kind of hills and plateaus that I visited in one of the earlier episodes of Prague of the Beaten Track 2. And seeing them from here, I think, gives you a kind of new sense of Prague's landscape symmetry. The two stony guardians of the Vltava facing each other across the valley. And if I turn around and walk just a little further down to the south, I can see upstream the massive Barandov Bridge that dominates the scene. I think it's more of a symbol of the 20th century engineering, framed by the wooded slopes of the opposite bank, and beyond it stretch the housing estates and villas of Barandov and Hlubočepy. I think they are sort of reminders of how the city continues to expand into its ancient limestone hills. So standing here, literally above the fossils from a prehistoric sea, and you see the rush of modern life below, you get a real sense, I think, of Prague's layers, geological, historical and human, all stacked together in one remarkable view. Let me just briefly mention that Branické Skály, as the name indicates, lie within the Prague district of Braník, a neighborhood that is definitely also worth a stroll. It stretches along the right bank of the Vltava in the city's south between Podolí and Modrany. And despite being just a tram ride away from the center, Braník, as I got to know it, has kept a kind of quieter, almost suburban charm. There are some narrow streets lined with villas and gardens, traces of its old lime quarries that were, they were more numerous in this area. Today, Braník is probably best known for a few distinctive landmarks: the Dominican Court, a 17th century Baroque complex once owned by the Dominican Order, the small church of St. Prokop with its twin bell towers overlooking the neighborhood, and of course Braník Brewery, founded in 1898, whose name still lives on in a popular Czech beer brand, even though brewing here actually ceased in 2006 and the beer is brewed elsewhere, even though the beer still bears the name Braník. There are also reminders of the district's working past, the grand ice storage halls, or Branické ledárny, built in 1911 to store blocks of ice cut from the frozen Vltava. And today they stand as a kind of monument to a time when Braník's life revolved around the river and the industries it supported. And above this quiet riverside district rise these Branické skály, the cliffs that have watched over Braník for centuries. So I think it can be said that they really link the neighborhood's working past with its natural beauty, its layers of history with the living rhythm of the river below. So, standing here on Vávrová vyhlídka, you can see it all. The curve of the Vltava, the opposite cliffs of Dívčí hrady, the distant outline of Prague Castle, and at your feet the ancient limestone that once formed the bottom of a prehistoric sea. I think few places in the city capture so clearly how Prague's story is written not only in its buildings but also in its rocks, hills and the people who lived among them and still live. So that's all for today. As always, if you go to the Prague of the Beaten Track page at Radio Prague International website, you will find some photographs, a map and a fact box summarizing what I've been talking about. So, stay safe, stay healthy and curious, and until next time, naslyšenou.
Prague off the beaten track. Vít Bohanka takes you away from the crowds to the city's hidden gems.